Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to my Paladin deck tech. Now, first things first, Happy New Year everyone. We're into 2015, 2015 is indeed out. But yeah, as far as Paladin goes, this is the deck that I was laddering with last season. Now, one thing I want to say is every Paladin deck is different. All of them are different. I'm not saying this is the best version, this is just the one I was playing. I got the idea actually from Moon on Lucky Draw. He's been on Versus Series before, Moonstar. The only difference between his deck list and my deck list was that he was running Piloted Sky Golem and I was running Black Knight. That's the only difference. Now, as I said, I don't know if this is the best version. I'm actually going to be playing a different version of Paladin this latter season. I'm also going to fiddle around with some other stuff. But this is just the version of Paladin I was trying out, and it worked out fairly well. It did quite well, it performed reasonably well, and I think it's a viable version, even though there's a couple interesting additions to this particular list. So, first things first, the theme of this deck is it is a Blood Knight Paladin. Now, what does this do? We'll talk about Blood Knight first. Blood Knight basically means that your matchup against other Paladins is absolutely insane. You just Blood Knight their shielded mini-bots and they're Neurotrons, and they get completely destroyed. That's basically how Blood Knight works, and it's absolutely insane making it 3 mana 6/6. The biggest one I made was a 15/15. That was that was an exceptional situation though. And the biggest one I've had to play against was a 12/12 because I had 2 Divine Shields, he had 1, and he just Blood Knighted me and I lost. So Blood Knight is really important in the mirror, and it's also pretty handy in general. Making a 6/6 for 3 mana is actually really good. So I think Blood Knight is really powerful right now. I could see running 1, but I prefer running 2 because you can use it as an offensive tool in certain matchups, and I really like Blood Knight. At least in this kind of version of Paladin, double Blood Knight is really nice. Although I could see running 1 if you wanted to make space for some other stuff like Knife Juggler, which this deck has neglected, which we'll get to in a bit. So, Argent Squire, one of, because there just isn't enough space for a second copy, and it's a bad top deck, but really nice to have on turn 1, helps with the curve, and works with Blood Knight, and it's very good at trading. Equality, a lot of Paladin decks have dropped this. I'm running 1, I like the 1 of Equality, I don't like 2, they clog up your hand too much, but I can definitely see 1, although I think that the decks running Knife Juggler don't need Equality as much, because they can just overpower people with Knife Juggler. So Equality has been shifting out of Paladin decks, at least the mid-rangey Paladin decks, but as one of, it's quite handy. Anoirotron, the all-star against things like Zoo and Warrior. Anoirotron lives up to its name against Warrior. It absorbs 2 hits from anything, from Deathspite to Ragnaros, and it's just really irritating to get rid of. It is in fact an Anoirotron, if you will. It is incredibly annoying to get rid of, and against Zoo, it buys you all the time. Against Undertaker, it buys you a lot of time. Dealing with Undertaker is really difficult as Paladin, so against Undertaker openings, Anoirotron is pretty essential and does its job very well. Ironbeak Owl, my channel mascot, is finally making it into a deck that I am playing. Now, I love Ironbeak Owl. I mean, obviously, I picked it as my channel mascot because it is the marquee silence guy, just like with the 6 Swampus, it's the marquee weapon removal guy, it's the cheapest one. Now, Ironbeak Owl actually does a lot of work. It kills Nerubian eggs, basically. It kills Nerubian eggs, it's very good against Haunted Creepers, Mad Scientist, Undertaker. These are all things you need to Ironbeak Owl in the aggro matchups. And in the controlling matchups, it just deals with things like Sylvanas, and it's really, really handy. The 2/1 body does come to hurt you a little bit in some matchups, but to be perfectly honest right now, there aren't that many matchups where this hurts you. There really aren't. The reason for it is because you play it late game and you hero power as well, so they have to keep pinging your tokens because of Quartermaster. So if they're a mage or a druid or a rogue, you keep having to ping the Quartermaster. Basically, because of Quartermaster, they keep having to ping the Silverhand recruits, because otherwise they become 3/3s. So the Ironbeak Owl actually survives on board for a long time now. The only time this is a liability is against Warrior, but against Warrior, usually using this on something like Acolyte, which is a big swing. So it ends up working out pretty well. Jotto doing some serious work. Now, Shielded Minibot, this is one of the many additions from GvG that has made Paladin much, much stronger than it used to be. Shielded Minibot is one of the best 2-drops you can play. 2-2 for 2 trades with most things. It trades with, well, I mean, it doesn't trade, it actually kills Mad Scientist, and it's quite good at trading with Undertaker, although sometimes they just ignore it, which is what usually happens actually. They just ignore it, and you have to kill it for 2 turns, and it gets a bit awkward. But what Shield Minibot does best is it stops itself from dying to Fiery War Axe, stops itself from dying to things like Lightning Bolt, Wrath, just any straight up removal. They have to invest more mana into killing it. Mages have to ping Frostbolt it to kill it, or it will just take out their Snow Chuggers, because when a Divine Shield is popped, it does not get frozen. So they have to take out, they have to take it out before the Snow Chuggers get kind of neutralized by Shield Minibot, and Snow Chugger being neutralized is really important because you have so many weapons in Paladin nowadays. So Shield Minibot, very, very good at trading, very important in the mirror match, especially with Blood Knight. If you have Shield Minibot into Blood Knight, you're really, really far ahead in the mirror. Coghammer. Now, Coghammer was one of those cards which landed on my overrated list, actually. Coghammer, I have seen people run it as a 2-of. I think as a 1-off it's fine because you have so many weapons. There are so many weapons now. There's the Muster for Battle weapons, there's Truesilver, Coghammer, and also there's also the 5/3 weapon, Ashbringer, of Tyrion. So as a result, Coghammer, you get replaced a lot. This actually happens a lot. You replace your own weapons a lot in Paladin. However, the trigger, the Divine Shield and Taunt, is amazing. It is basically what makes this weapon good. As a 2/3 for 3, it's only really good in some matchups like Zoo. It's very good against Zoo. However, the trigger you get from playing it is absolutely insane, and is the reason you play it. Muster for Battle. Another card in GvG. We're on a roll here with these 3 GvG cards in a row. One of the cards that has made Paladin incredibly irritating to deal with as a warrior, along with Quartermaster. Muster for Battle Quartermaster is one of the best combinations in the mid-game possible. 8 mana, 3 3/3s, a 1/4 weapon, and a 2/5. Just go down to Quartermaster here. It does so much work between these two. But the key thing between these two is that Muster for Battle can be played on turn 3, and it's just 3 guys, 3 dudes seriously, and that's why Knife Juggler is so good now in Paladin, is you can Muster for Battle after Knife Juggler and just get a bunch of triggers. Now, this deck does not have Knife Juggler, mostly because it does not have space. It's running a couple other techs that are a bit greedier in that regard, so you don't have enough space for the Knife Jugglers. But I definitely want to try out a Knife Juggler version in this season. Now, Muster for Battle does a lot of work. In the mirror, it's very important. As long as neither player has a Knife Juggler, Muster for Battle is crazy. So you can just trade off your guys, and you can use the 1/4s to kill the tokens. Against Warrior, it's really important because it lets you stack your board up after AoEs, and then you can Quartermaster on turn 6 or 7 or such, and you can just blow him out, even after Brawl. And the other thing it is very important in is aggro matchups. The 3/1/1s are very, very important. They work with Defender Vargas, which we'll get to in a bit. And the 1/4 weapon is surprisingly relevant. Outdoor Peacekeeper, the shut down anything card. Well, kind of. I mean, with all the Silverhand recruits, they still kill Silverhand recruits if you outdoor it. But this allows you to deal with giants. Basically, it allows you to neutralize it and then just trade into it. Because you can Iron Beak Outlet, and that's terrible. But it allows you to neutralize any big targets. Weirdly enough, the target that hits the most is actually Loatheb, in my opinion. Loatheb gets hit a lot by Eldor, and it's a really, really good way of shutting down the 5/5. The other one is Sylvanas. You don't want Sylvanas dealing damage to your board, and if you don't have a silence, Eldoring it is the next best thing. So Eldor, very, very good, only 1-of, because we have the Big Game Hunter, which does something similar to Eldor. This is primarily for boom and handlock. It does its job, but massive tempo swing, very, very good at what it does, and I think requires its position in every single deck right now. We already talked about Blood Knight. Truesilver Champion, the second best weapon in the game. I think Deathbite is the best. But anyway, it's the best Paladin weapon. 2 for 1 on a 4 drop is absolutely amazing. It also heals you for 4. This is really relevant nowadays. This is something I've noticed. True Silver healing you for 4 is way more important than it used to be. Why? Because you're playing a mid-rangey deck where you take a lot of damage from your weapons and you need to stay alive because your late game is incredible with your hero power. So True Silver healing is actually really relevant in some matchups, especially against Warrior. If they try and rush you down, the True Silver healing potential is really important. So True Silver, vanilla weapon with a bit of healing, and it's very, very good. Consecration, every deck needs an AoE. This is an AoE. It also does some direct damage from time to time, but yeah, nice AoE, only 4 mana, pretty useful. Defender of Argus, taunting things up is a common theme here. Why? Because you want damage mitigation. Now this works well with your hero power and muster for battle, making 2/2s with taunt. It's just very, very nice to have these taunt enablers, and Defender of Argus never really feels that dead when you're playing Paladin. It's kind of like with Shaman, where you can just make something if you don't have anything on the board. And it's only a one-off because you can't really fit 2 in the deck without making them a bit clunky. Piloted Shredder, the marquee 4-drop from GvG, and it is incredibly good. Now, sometimes this messes you up a bit, but other times it messes your opponent up, so it balances out. Now, the 2-drop that comes off this is usually just really irritating. The other thing is it lives through AoE while being able to trade with something that has 4 attack. Very, very good for... It's the best 4 mana 4/3 in the game and is incredibly good. Anti-Killbot. Now this is an interesting addition. Most of these Paladin decks are not running Anti-Killbot. However, the reason this deck has Anti-Killbot, and note mine is golden. Yes, I have a golden Anti-Killbot. I opened that on day 1. Anti-Killbot is very important against Hunter. That is the major thing here. Hunter, Warrior, and Zoo. Against Warriors, because the only way you can really lose to Warriors is if they rush you down, because you just fill the board up over and over and over again and completely smash them. However, they can rush you down a bit with weapons and then combo kill you from 12 with the Grommash and Cruel Taskmaster combo. So Anti-Killbot, along with the Lay on Hands and the True Silvers, keep you out of kill range, which is very important. So very, very nice card to have in the deck. Although some people don't run it because they prefer going for more tempo-centric as opposed to a loss of tempo in exchange for a gain in life. Loatheb. If you're playing a tempo deck, you're playing Loatheb. I can see cutting him in control decks, actually. This is something that's come up. You don't need him in control decks because you don't really want to tempo your opponent out. You want to just maintain board control. But if you're playing a tempo deck, which is basically what this is, it's a mid-rangey tempo deck, you want Loatheb. He does his job. He's the king of tempo, and he is absolutely amazing in this kind of deck. Quartermaster, we brushed on this earlier. Now, the most important thing about Quartermaster is he's incredibly powerful. However, using him correctly is incredibly difficult. It's actually what dictates the Paladin mirror match. The Paladin mirror match, there's 2 ways the Paladin mirror match can go. It either ends really fast because someone got a snowball start, or if you get past turn 7 or 8, it becomes a grindy, incredibly skill-intensive match. Incredibly skill-intensive. It matters entirely when you use your Consecrates, when you use your Quartermasters, and you're going to draw them because the game is going to go pretty long, but when you use them is really important, and it's the most skill-testing thing about playing this deck, I think. Against Warrior, Quartermaster is what punishes them for brawling. You can use one to incentivize the brawl, and then you can use the second one to just kill them through anything else they can do. At that point, the only thing that can really help them is Baron Geddon with a Whirlwind, and that's a 2-card combo which they need to have. So Quartermaster, very powerful. Those incidental 1/1s build up in a lot of matchups, and the Quartermaster helps out massively by putting a huge amount of attack and health on the board when you play him. Sylvanas, the best 6-drop you can play, I'm afraid. Well, not afraid Sylvanas is the best one you can play, but the fact that there's only one 6-drop that is good in Paladin. This is really awkward. This was mentioned on the Pinnacle, I think, or Kinguin. It was one of those. I think it was Kinguin, where Life Coach was talking about the fact that Paladin doesn't really have good 6-drops. He was playing Hogger. I mean, I can see that, but I don't really like Hogger. But Sylvanas is absolutely amazing. It's the ultimate control killer and is just a beat stick sometimes at a 5/5. So 5/5 generally okay in terms of size, but it also wrecks control decks. Sylvanas, very, very good, and I would say is a staple in most of the slower decks. Now, this is my other 6 drop. Now, as I said, Moon, who gave me this deck, was playing Piloted Sky Golem, which is just supposed to be a bit of a sticky thing. I went for the tempo play in the Black Knight. I like my tempo plays, what can I say? So I went with Black Knight. I will say Black Knight is very underrated right now. This actually kills something probably every game I draw it. Now that I think about it, I have not played, this is actually true, I have not played a Black Knight on the board without killing something. That's insane. I've played Black Knight in almost every metagame for the past year. And I have never seen a metagame where you can play that deck for over 150 games and you never play Black Knight as a 4-5. That's really common to play Black Knight as a 4-5 when they don't have taunts. This thing kills a taunt every single game. It's ridiculous because everyone's playing Sludge Belcher or Defender of Argus or something. So Black Knight just kills something every game. And that's insane. There's a lot of value on Black Knight right now, and it's easily the most underrated card in the game right now. No one's playing about it. Like, no one's playing, no one's talking about it, and I think it's criminal that people aren't talking about this card at least as an option, because it is very, very good right now. I can see why you wouldn't play it if you're sort of passing it up for something else. However, not even talking about playing it is kind of insane right now. But anyway, 7-drop, Dr. Boom, only one 7-drop. You only really need the Boom as a 7-drop. Boom is the Mark E. I know I've used Mark E like 3 times this video, 4 maybe. But anyway, he is the 7-drop that you kind of have to use. He's just so much value. It's crazy. 7/7 plus 2 1/1s, and the 1/1s kill things? Like, he's the only 7-drop in the entire game with 7 attack that does not get punished massively by Big Game Hunter. I mean, if they have Big Game Hunter, it's obviously bad for you because it means your Boom got Big Game Huntered. However, the Boom bots still do something, and that's really, really nice. Whereas other things, when they get Big Game Huntered, is just miserable. Like, Ragnaros getting Big Game Huntered is pretty brutal, and that sometimes kills something, and that's pretty brutal, just to give you an idea of how much of a blowout it is when you get Big Game Huntered. However, the Boom bots make up for that, and when it doesn't get Big Game Huntered, it takes over the game. So, Dr. Boom, very, very good card right now. Lay on Hands. I am very happy to be playing a deck with Lay on Hands again, because this is one of my favorite cards to play. Why? Because figuring out when you play Lay on Hands is very difficult. There's some turns where it's just like, I need to heal for 8, and you just have to Lay on Hands. However, knowing when to Lay on Hands when you're not in a situation where it's like, I'm going to die, is really important. Knowing how long to hold your Lay on Hands when you're against a control deck is quite important, because it's the toss-up of, I could play something this turn, or I could Lay on Hands to make my future turns better because I have more options. That's kind of the give or take balance you've got to figure. And Lay on Hands is a really skill testing card in control matchups. Against aggro, it's kind of like, am I going to die next turn? Lay on Hands on turn 8. That's not difficult. However, using Lay on Hands against control decks is a massive skill tester. So Lay on Hands, one of my favorite Paladin cards. And the last card in the deck is the one, the only Tyrion Fordring. Tyrion Fordring is arguably the best class legendary. Arguably. There's a couple that compete. But Tyrion Fordring doesn't die to Big Game Hunter. And he is an absolute game ender. 6/6 is the perfect size to just start swinging in and killing them. I mean, being one bigger than Loatheb is actually really important, because that also means it's one bigger than Sylvanas, Silent Sylvanas obviously. One bigger than Sylvanas, one bigger than Ancient of Lore. It has more health than things like Ancient of War can deal out. There really aren't that many things with more than 5 attack, apart from Boom and Ragnaros and things like that. And for that you have Divine Shields. So, Divine Shield, Taunt, very powerful combination, saw Coghammer earlier. And being 6/6 is absolutely perfect, because it means he can't get Big Game Huntered, and even when he does die, which realistically happens a lot, I think I only swing in with Tyrion to kill him a couple times, the Ashbringer does 15 damage. That's a lot. Like, that's half of their life total over 3 turns. That is a lot of damage. And added to the fact that you can deal a lot of incidental damage for the rest of the game, Tyrion will often just end the game if he doesn't get silenced. And you have Sylvanas to bait out the silence, you have Piloted Shredders, things like that. So Tyrion is the perfect top of the curve. It does mean there's only one Big Game Hunter target in this deck, which is Boom, but it also means that big game Hunter is sometimes just a dead card in their hand if you don't draw the boom. I've seen some people running Ragnaros in this deck. I don't really like Rag right now because there's so many incidental like 1/1s on the board from Paladin and Hunter and Zoo and things like that. Rag I think is not fantastic. Rag is very good in those decks that can clear the board continuously. So in Control Warrior it's obviously just a win condition. But in things like that Rogue deck that has been running around recently, they can afford to run Rag because they clear the board very frequently. So Rag will usually be hitting the face or the important target on the board. So it works. But when it comes to something like Paladin, I think it's more important to consolidate your board position as opposed to going for some sort of risky play like it is with Rag. So Tyrion fits in that game plan perfectly. But anyway, as for matchups, the bad matchups for this deck from what I've seen is Hunter is not fantastic. It's like 45%. It's not really that good. It's below 50, but not by much. Priest is pretty miserable. However, Priest has dropped off massively. I did the sort of prediction thing, or what to ladder with. Priest was on that list. I think if I had to redo that list right now, it would be Hunter at 5. Actually, no, it'd be Mage at 5, Hunter at 4. And then Priest would just not be on the list. And Druid would be 6 if you went above that. Maybe 5, Mage 6. It's difficult to figure out where the metagame is right now. All I know is that the top 3 decks are Paladin, Warrior, and Warlock. Against Zoo, this Paladin deck does quite well. It's like 60%, I think. Against Warrior, it's like 65. Hand block is kind of brutal sometimes. It depends a lot on their draw. It depends a lot on draw. If you both draw equally, the Warlock will usually win if it's Handlock and will lose if it's Zoo. That's kind of how that works out. So I think Paladin is very strong right now. I do think Warlock is the strongest class. However, Paladin is a close second. It's good against Warrior. It's good against half of the Warlock deck. So it's a pretty well-positioned deck right now. And as said, I will be trying out some different versions. This is the non-Knife Juggler version. I think I'll try out some Knife Juggler versions and see how that goes. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, this is from Jotto.